We're talking the 2025 freshman class with 24/7's Alan Trieu. Campus to Canton is live right now. It's Felix Sharpe, Austin Nace, Matt Bruening, and Alan Trieu, one of our favorite returning guests here on Campus to Canton. If you like what we're doing, trying to spread the good word of college fantasy football, then do us a favor. Drop this video a like. I think that we're going to get a lot of good information in this one. Alan has been coming on with us for, I feel like since we started back in 2021. And, of course, we will get to our game. Matthew, you know you're in the game show again today. For those who have not seen the game, here in recent years, we're going to go toe-to-toe, Alan and Matthew, a random draw. We'll get to that point. Yeah. But, Alan, I think it's a natural place to start with the University of Michigan because you're in that state. You cover that area. And, of course, the biggest news in recruiting this year was Bryce Underwood flipping from LSU to Michigan. Like, what can you tell us about what happened there? And do you think that this can continue? Because we've commented here that if you're an elite offensive skill position talent outside of running back, quarterback, wide receiver, you don't go to Michigan. So do you think that this can continue? And what happened with Bryce Underwood going to Michigan?
Okay, so first, what happened with him was Michigan never really stopped recruiting him, obviously, which you don't do with a guy of his caliber at a position of need that's that close to your school. And they basically just said, you're not leaving. I mean, they did whatever it took. And that's been very well documented, the NIL package that they put together for him. If you talk to him and people around him, they'll tell you that wasn't the main reason. There was, and how much of that you choose to believe is on you, but it certainly was a factor. But I don't think he would just have taken a giant NIL deal if he thought he was going to a place where he wouldn't have an opportunity. And obviously at Michigan, it's a pretty good situation for a freshman quarterback to go into if you're thinking about having a chance to start right away, or at least be in the mix right away. And it's right there. They're invested in him. I think it's similar. I've said this about Nico at Tennessee. Like, they invested so much in him that they almost like he can't fail. They have to do everything they can to make sure he develops. And I think that's the same situation here where with Michigan, it would be disastrous if Bryce Underwood didn't turn out. So they're going to do everything that it takes to make sure that he's successful too. So I think he felt that.
The follow-up question there is, do you think that this can continue? Because obviously Dante Moore coming from Detroit King, Bryce Underwood being there in Belleville, we were making fun of Michigan because we said they're not going to get either of these players. Of course, Donovan Edwards stayed in state. But do you think that this can continue into the future where, offensive skill position, of course, defense, cornerbacks, offensive line, they're going to want to go to Michigan, maybe even tight ends, Colston Loveland, Jake Butt. They've got a good history there. But quarterbacks, because of the offense that they play, I would even make an argument that they didn't really help J.J. McCarthy reach his ceiling offensively. That offense wasn't really built around him. It was built around Blake Corum. All that to providing the context for the question is, do you think that this can continue into the future?
Sure. So just from a recruiting standpoint, Michigan should be able to compete at this level in recruiting because in terms of what they just did with Bryce NIL-wise, it wasn't just isolated to him either. If you look at the rest of this class, they pulled in some guys, I think, thanks to increased NIL efforts. So if they're playing the NIL game, they obviously have this giant stadium, this giant following, this alumni base, this tradition. Those pieces are in place. They're going to have to show skill guys that they're going to play differently. I think that it has been the case. I think Ron Bellamy, their receivers coach, catches some flack, and I would not necessarily put that on Ron. And they have some guys coming in, like Andrew Marsh is a top end guy. coming in. I think if he's successful, they need someone like that to succeed and turn into a top end NFL guy. And then I think they can flip the narrative. And Bryce needs to turn out. I think if Bryce turns out and Andrew Marsh turns out, then we're looking back at this conversation in a couple of years and saying, I think it can be sustainable just because of the type of program they have. And I do think that they're going to be more invested in having Bryce succeed. So I would expect them to change the offense a little bit. Obviously, they're bringing in a new offensive coordinator. I don't expect them to vary too far from what they've done, but I don't think that this has to be a flash in the pan, just because I think they're going to be so invested in having Bryce be successful.
Alan, I mean, you just mentioned them bringing in the new offensive coordinator, Chip Lindsey, who, from like a fantasy perspective, has had very good offenses. I mean, go back to his time at North Carolina. But a lot of us are worried, at least before that hire, that, Bryce Underwood's coming into a Michigan team that hasn't, as Felix mentioned, really emphasized the quarterback. Do you think Bryce Underwood is good enough to, I don't know how I want to word this, is good enough to be better than that if the offense doesn't improve? If it stays to kind of what it was, like Felix said, didn't complement J.J. McCarthy's skill set and everything, is Bryce Underwood good enough to move past that and be better than that?
Yeah, so for one thing, I do think so. I also think that Sharon Moore is going to be a little bit more open in offensive line, and they didn't run the ball as effectively. I don't know that you can always just play that way coming up. And I do think with Bryce Underwood being there, they're going to build the offense a little bit more around him. J.J. McCarthy was a top-end recruit, but he wasn't a guy that I think coming in that you said you have to make the offense fit him. I think with Bryce, the situation of it and just, again, the investment that they have in him, I don't think that they're going to have him handing the ball off, 40, 50 times a game.
Alan, you've been doing this obviously a lot longer than us. Where would you rank Bryce Underwood? Like, we love Bryce Underwood. I've talked about, I think, obviously, we've only been doing this for 4 years. He's the highest ranked quarterback that I've had since doing this for the past 4 years. You've been doing this much longer. Where does Bryce Underwood rank for you, just in how special he has looked throughout his high school career?
Yeah, so I would say I get afraid of making. I'm a little more nervous on these historical comparisons than some of the guys on our staff who start like I don't like labeling anybody as generational and this and that. That said, he has got to be. The thing is, I thought for me, Dante Moore was the best high school quarterback that came out of this state and this region since I've been doing this. So he set a pretty high bar, and I think Bryce is maybe a nudge. I don't even know that I think Bryce is necessarily better. I think they're quite even in terms of how good I thought they were in high school. They're just also very different in terms of how they play and their skill set. So it's hard to make a direct comparison. I didn't cover Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. Those guys were like historically as high ranked a quarterback as I've seen. I did watch them duel it out in 7-on-7. And I think Bryce is right there with those guys. And what I saw Bryce do in some of these events, his performance at, I think it was OT7 or next ones that he went to. There were multiple events that Bryce went to where I'm telling you, our staff went in saying, we might like Tavian St. Clair just as much, or we like Keelan Russell just as much. Bryce better do what Bryce does, or we're going to have a real discussion about who's number one. The fact that he hung on to it, I think, tells you how good he was at some of those things. And so, yes, historically for me, he's the best quarterback that I've evaluated, but there's not like a huge gap because I thought Dante Moore was incredibly special coming out of high school. And I still think he's got a shot to be that. Sounds like there's some buzz that he's still going to turn out. So,
I still have him in the top 20 of my ranking. So
I would not put Bryce like way above the pack, but he's number one.
Go ahead, Austin.
I don't really have a question necessarily about Michigan for you, so I don't know if you guys want me to throw my question here at this point or later on. And
Yeah, go ahead. Because I think what we've covered. I see Shane asking, is he Trevor or Deshaun good? But I think Alan's kind of answered that here in the chat. So,
All right, Al, I know this player is not in your area here, but I've got to ask you, Quentin Gibson, the wide receiver out of Texas, out of North Crowley there, who's headed to Colorado. Is there something that we are missing? I know there is a 5'7", 145 listing floating around out there. Is that why he's really suppressed in some of these rankings? Because he had that huge senior season and the highest level of high school football and looked really dynamic doing it. I mean, is that really basically the issue? It's just that 5'7", 145 is probably accurate for him?
Yeah, and I think even if that's not entirely accurate, he's not a big guy. So without being the guy that's firmly in charge of his evaluation or has even been involved in that one, I believe that's the only, because everything else about him, I think, checks out. And so I would think that the concern about size is ultimately what's holding him back. And it's not like we haven't had some guys that size ranked highly before. So I guess I can't give you a firm answer on that, but that would be my educated guess.
Okay.
And wasn't Jordan Houston? He came from the same. But he came from the same area, had the production, and I mean, he went to TCU and then transferred to SMU, and because we drafted a lot of Jordan Houston,
Hudson.
at least Jordan Hudson. Similar stop play. Austin, do you know off the top, because you've talked about this player on Twitter? Do you know how productive he was this past season off the top of your head?
Over 2,000 total scrimmage yards as a senior, close to 40 touchdowns. I think just short of 100 receptions total. I mean, it was in 6A high school football, like led a high school that I don't know if they'd ever actually won a state championship or maybe had like one, but this isn't like necessarily a traditional, powerhouse. And they kind of just destroyed everything in their path all season. It's pretty incredible.
So, I mean, if you're playing in campus to Canton leagues, if you're listening to this, that's a value that you can get probably in the third or fourth round. Unless
I'm saying something nice about Colorado. That should tell you that I think this player is, if he's closer to 5'8", 165, I could swallow that. The 5'7", 145 is, tiny.
So, Alan, you know what we do around here. I mean, we're a fantasy football company. So what would you say, just generally speaking, are the strengths and weaknesses in the skill positions of this 2025 freshman class?
I actually had one interesting tidbit for you. The North Crawley offensive coordinator, they put up all those yards. He was coaching college ball up here. I want to say he was at Northwood. He's from Montrose. So
shout out to Bryce, my boy Bryce, who played at Northwood from Battle Creek Central. Yeah.
So I mean, I think quarterback is very strong. I mean, I had a hard time when we were thinking about doing this mock draft. I think we go 5, 6, 7, 8 deep with guys that are really good. I think there's a couple guys that if Bryce Underwood isn't in this class, you have a couple of number one guys, and we have some guys hanging around that kind of like high 4-star range that I think could have been 5 stars in other years if it just wasn't like a really deep class pushing those guys down. So I think it's a really, really good quarterback class. I think I like the tight end class, especially at the top end. I think we're gonna have some tight ends and it's a deep tight end class. Like as I went through the tight ends, I thought we go into the 3 stars, and there's some guys going to the Big Ten that kind of, I don't want to say, you always get concerned when you put a 3 on a guy, and there's some guys going to Big Ten schools that I'm like, well, maybe we should look again at a couple of these dudes. So, I don't see running back and receiver being like super, super strong compared to the other years around this, but I thought quarterback, I really like this quarterback class, and I think it's a deep tight end class.
Now, Matt and Austin, I want to ask you, because I want to get this on the record here now. You guys are deeper in the freshman class than I am. Years past, Lenore Sellers, Quinshawn Judkins, we've had some players that, compared to the legacy recruiting services, including 24/7, we've been higher on or lower on. Are there any players you want to put on the record now that we can throw out there and discuss with Alan and say, hey, we're higher or lower on this player that we need to discuss?
Man, just like throw us to the spot. Go ahead, Austin. I mean, I know guys that I'm higher on, but go ahead.
Gibson's the big one. But beyond him, I'm just looking through, some of my lower rated guys here that I really, really like. What about Jace Clarizio? That's a guy that's up in your area there, Alan, going to Michigan State there, kind of, flirted with Bama there for a short time. Athletic profile, we've got him like 90th plus percentile in our database in a bunch of different metrics. Good size, very productive there. He's a borderline 3-4 star depending on which service you're looking at. I really like him. I've got him top 15 in the class at the position.
Yeah, actually, he's on my list to give you guys as I wouldn't call him a sleeper, but he is kind of probably a little bit lower than maybe, especially if you're thinking about it from like a fantasy perspective. I think he's going to end up being the feature back at Michigan State. He's a legacy guy there. Really, really strong senior year. I think, we're going to do a final round of evals here before we close things out in February. I think he's a guy that will be talked about as somebody who can move up. I think some of the concern was how he ran between the tackles. And so I think we want to pull some full games and just kind of see how he did when he wasn't breaking the big ones. But certainly a lot to like about him. He's on my list, and he's on my list to give you guys, but he's also on my list to kind of push up. I think for me, I think he would be a 4-star if I had my way.
There we go. All right, now I want to get to this game because this is my favorite part of having Alan on. But Matthew, you got something else before we get to the game?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, Alan, we're obviously about to head into the playoffs over the next couple of days. A ton of very talented quarterbacks, right? You got Drew Allar, very highly ranked. We loved him. Not so much Riley Leonard or Will Howard, but our favorite quarterback here at the network, Quinn Ewers. Felix loves this guy. What do you think went wrong with Quinn? Because I thought he was an amazing prospect. Obviously, everybody did, right? Not just you, ESPN, Rivals, On3. Like, everybody loved him. What happened? What do you think the disconnect there was with Quinn?
Is he really Felix's favorite, or was that a...
No, Felix hates him. Felix hates this guy.
Okay.
I had Devin Brown rated higher, but that didn't work out. But go ahead.
So... if you guys remember going back to the summer before or the offseason before his senior year, he went to the Elite 11 and he was regularly finishing like 6th in those rankings. So you can go back and look at him. I had never seen him. I had just heard he was this. I was expecting Trevor Lawrence. And I'm not saying this because I got asked the question. It's documented. I was kind of like, that's the guy, I thought he would, I think he's always been, if you look at his high school stuff, he was obviously went to a really good school, won a ton of games, was in a really good system. I didn't think when he threw on air, it wasn't like you were blown away by the arm talent. I think that's still the case, right? I don't think he's the most physically gifted guy in the group. I didn't think he was back then. So you were kind of banking on him doing what he did in high school, which is sort of being a very good distributor of the ball, a very accurate guy, a guy who threw with a lot of touch. But I think that for me, I would guess the lack of real like strong physical attributes has caught up with him. There was always these whispers that he was kind of just like a little bit of a lackadaisical guy. But then he won all those games in high school. I was like, you can't win all those. Some people have that kind of personality, but you still can't win all those games in Texas without being, having something to you. So I don't know if I buy that as much as I just don't know that he ever was, for me, when watching him just in that setting, and Drew was in that setting, we ended up bumping Drew way up. But there was a real discussion about dropping Quinn and how far to drop Quinn. I think the not having like any elite trait was really what stood out at that time. I think that's probably still the case now.
Nice. And I want to add to this conversation because there was a similarity between, and Austin, Matt, I said this back then, there was a similarity between Sam Heward's tape and Quinn Ewers' tape in that these guys were super well protected in high school and they were throwing just a lot of like go routes and 9 routes to players who are open Which, I mean, I could go get the quarterback from Kalamazoo, Lloyd Norris, to make a lot of those throws, as opposed to somebody like Drew Aller, who I saw escape pressure, throw off arm angles. Same thing with Bryce Underwood, as a matter of fact. To me, there is a huge difference between Bryce Underwood and Tavian St. Clair in this class. Like, St. Clair is the Quinn Ewers, Sam Hewitt type, and Bryce Underwood, to me, is the Drew Aller type. So, yeah, like, I just didn't see those things in Quinn Ewers' tape. And obviously your reputation precedes you when you're the number 1 ranked player and you have a 1 rating. And I'm like, this guy's kind of making layups. I don't even see him he's not even getting any forced 3-pointers. He's not having to drive the lane. I don't, he might be that good, but I don't know that based on what I'm seeing. And I would argue that I saw a lot of those things on Drew Aller's tape that made me really excited about what he can be. And Drew Aller still hadn't even reached his profile. I still think he has another level.
I would say Quinn, almost like from my expectations, and he's kind of doing what I thought he would do, which is just win but not be spectacular. That's kind of what his college career has actually kind of gone how I thought it would go. But if you go back and it would be interesting, I think, if you went back and read some of the reports coming out of the Elite 11, there was some real skepticism about him. But that event is always difficult for us to know what to take from it, because there's been guys who have been awful at that thing that have turned out to be really good, and there's guys who have been great at that thing who have turned out to not be good. And so I think we didn't want to throw away everything that we had seen in Quinn for several years just because of that. But there were some signs, I would say, that maybe he shouldn't be quite that high if you go back and read some of those reports.
Well, 2 follow-ups on that real quick. One, if you want to see what Alan's talking about, I think they still have like the whole series on YouTube, so you can go watch it. And he's not wrong. He was losing out on some of those drills that they had in the Elite 11 stuff. But I want to ask you then, Alan, because Felix just said he thinks Taven St. Clair could be the Quinn Ewers of this class, but you guys were talking about him possibly battling with Keelan Russell and Bryce Underwood for the number 1 quarterback. Do you see that with Taven St. Clair?
I think he's got more physical attributes. Like, I've seen him throw on air, and I think when the ball comes out of his hand on air, and you can even watch some of the camp clips of him throwing, you're like, okay, this guy has the arm talent to make some big time throws at the next level. I think more so than that was some of the skepticism about Quinn does he have that upside with his arm? I think Tavian has that. I think he's a little bit more athletic. So I don't agree with that. I think Tavian will be really, really good.
And what's the because that's rural. He's coming out of rural Ohio. Mm-hmm. I'm not familiar with the level of competition in the state of Ohio. I know that there's around Cincinnati. There's really good football there. But where Tavian is, because that was another concern for me, was the level of competition. Is that any concern for you?
That's a legit concern. At the same time, his skill talent was not what Bryce had to work with, or even what Keelan had to work with, or what some of these other guys had to work with. So it's kind of a trade-off. And he's super productive. I think when you have small town guys, they have to really rise above, and I think he did that. So I would say there's going to maybe be more of an adjustment for him in terms of getting used to the speed of the college level and the speed of even his skill guys. And he wasn't a guy who was big and heavy out on the camp circuit or the 7-on-7 circuit. So he hasn't really thrown against or to a ton of guys that are at that level. So that might be a little bit more of an adjustment for him, but I think he'll get there. And I know that was Ohio State evaluated that one hard. He was not like a guy like in his junior year. He was coming up as a sophomore, even he was really good. And Ohio State sort of wanted to see him more. And it was actually at some of those Elite 11s and those events where Ryan Day had his son that Tavian really jumped up on their board. And then at their 7-on-7, they actually had him and Ryan Montgomery, who was going to Georgia. They went against each other in that 7-on-7. And I think that was the day that it really like cemented Tavian as their guy.
All right, Alan, I want to find out about your guys. In previous shows, a couple of years ago, you gave us Baron Morton. You gave us Benjamin Bramer. I can remember those off the top of my head. I know you've given us some other players. But in this class, 2025, give us those under-the-radar players that you think, not too many people are talking about like that right now, but that could have a big impact for us in fantasy.
Okay. I've got a few. Can I give a few? Because I got a couple at each position.
Yeah.
I like Mason Heinschel going to Pitt. I think it's going to be a good situation too. Put up a bunch of stats, good athlete. Michigan almost. I think if Bryce hadn't gone to Michigan, that's the guy they would have tried to take. His dad played baseball at Michigan, so I really like Mason. Indiana just took a kid named Jacob Bell really late out of Illinois that I think is interesting. And they have a walk-on quarterback coming in and him. He's the scholarship guy in this class. So he's an interesting one. He was committed to Ball State. We thought he might be a little bit better than that. Indiana comes in and steals him here. And, like I said, they have a walk-on who's pretty good coming in, but he's the scholarship guy in this class. So they're going to be invested in him. And I like what, obviously, they've done with Curtis Rourke and what they've done with their program there. Bryce Button going to Eastern Michigan is the MAC guy that I think is my sleeper MAC guy. So those are my quarterbacks. Running backs, Clarizio was one of them. I think Tavian Swint going to UCF is a really good. He's a 4, but he's kind of at the end of the 4, so I don't know if people are on top of that one. I know you guys get pretty deep, so I like him. I like River Peppers going to Iowa State. I like what they're doing. I mean, they've obviously just had a tradition of success at running backs, and I think that kid's got some skills. Jerron Thomas going to Purdue has high-end skill. I mean, he has 10.7, I think, in track. He squats a ton. He's got some real physical ability. I don't know that his game is totally matched the physical upside yet, but I think he'll get there. I think Tristan White going to Northern Illinois is going to be really good. And they've done well at that position too. So receiver, I think Sean Terry going to Missouri. I would like us to bump that guy. Take a look at it if you guys haven't, huge season in Ohio. Braylon Collier going to Michigan State. Another guy, huge year, and I think is going into a situation where he could end up being the primary receiver, or at least their 2 before long. Kansas State took a kid late named Larry Porter at receiver. He's like a long 6'4" athletic kid that didn't have much going, blew up late. I think he's a good one. And then my MAC guy at receiver is Omar Mims going to Toledo. Have you guys taken a look at that kid?
No,
500 meter guy that they found as a senior, and can really run, really run. Will be a return guy also.
Austin, any of those guys? Oh, I'm sorry, you got tight ends too.
I got tight ends too. So my couple of sleeper tight ends. Let's see, who do I go with here? So Noah Laporte going to Northwestern. I think he's got a chance to be. He's a receiver. I think they'll convert him. Might be a big receiver, but I think he'll end up being a tight end. I like Kellen Ford. That's going to Arizona. Sneaky good get for them. Liam Russo going to Northern Illinois. I think is going to be a really good player for them. And Brady Rode going to Western Michigan. They just had Blake Bosma go into the portal and do really well. Brady kind of reminds me of him. And then one going to the Big Ten, Emmett Bork, that Wisconsin flipped from Michigan State. That guy has some real, he's got size. He's like 6'6", 240 pounds, played outside receiver. That's one that I would look at. That might be another Benjamin Bramer, Emmett Bork going to Wisconsin. So that would be, those are my guys.
All right. Austin, any of those guys stand out to you that you have opinions on?
I mean, not like strong opinions. We like Swints. I think I at least like Collier. I'll have to go back and rewatch Sean Terry because I've got him not rated very well at all. But I think those are the guys that I have like firm grades on that you mentioned. So you tossing out a Pitt quarterback is music to my ears as a Pitt alum. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Some sort of hope.
I love that kid. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And a Western Michigan kid, Kalamazoo, stand up. All right, Alan and Matthew, are you all ready for the game? Listen, I'm very, very prepared for the game. Well, before I get to all the theatrics, for those who haven't watched the show in years prior, Matthew and Alan go head to head. I give them a player's name, and all they got to tell me is the school and the position. Now, that's it. These are randomly drawn, and we go Alan and Matthew head to head. Now, Matthew, you've never won this game.
Nope.
What do you?
I've got one right so far out of how many 3 years?
So
3
far.
years. Yeah.
And I feel like we gave that to you. What do you have to say for yourself? Are you ready to go?
I'm just ready. I'm gonna win this year. So yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Alan, are you ready?
It's hard to beat a team multiple times. Eventually they're gonna. So this could be the year. Yeah.
Oh. Theatrics here. Let me make sure the volume's not too loud. Okay, remember, I'm going to give you the name. You just have to give me the position and the school. And remember, these are randomly drawn, okay? Since Alan is the guest, Alan, we will go first. Alan, your first player is Bryce Underwood.
Really throwing me in the deep end right away. But I'm gonna guess quarterback, and because I'm here in the state, I'll just say Michigan.
There you go. That's why he's the man. You know what? I can see why. That's your state. You got that one right. Okay.
Do I get someone in my state then? Is that how this goes?
Well, Matthew, just calm down. All right, you'll get your question here.
Okay.
Matthew.
Yes.
Your player is Jaden Rogers.
Okay. Jaden Rogers. We're gonna go.
It's 1-0.
Offensive tackle. Michigan. We're gonna go. No, Texas. I changed my Texas. Offensive tackle, Texas.
Is that your final answer?
Final answer.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Matthew. I'm so sorry. Defensive line.
I might know this one.
I'm sorry.
Is this guy going to Army?
Yes, he is. Defensive line, Army. Alan, you know what? Alan, we're going to give you 2 for that one. He's got to steal. Okay.
You gave me a Brighton. He's from Brighton. You gave me a Michigan kid, or you gave him a Michigan.
I thought that was right. I think when I was looking, I accidentally sorted by state, and I went to Michigan.
Yeah. He's right under Bryce Underwood in that list, I think.
There we go. All right, here we go. All right, Alan, we're back to you. Remember, these are randomly drawn here. Alan, your player is Decorian Moore.
Okay. The name just sounds like a skill guy, so I'm going to say wide receiver. And because I'm going to guess he's a highly regarded skill guy, I'm going to guess a team that he might go to is Oregon. So that's my guess.
Look at him. That's why he's the man. Randomly drawn here. All right, Matthew, here we go. Matthew, you can still come back here. Get yourself loose.
Yeah.
Matthew, your player is Steele Pizzella.
All right, Steele Pizzella. I mean, that just sounds like some kind of defensive player. So we're gonna go with cornerback, defensive back. That sounds like go with Wake Forest.
No, you did not.
I've actually got him graded.
Did I get it right?
Was that a blind guess?
Was that a blind guess? You got half of that right. Quarterback.
Half a point? Do I get half a point?
Going to Jake Dickert's Wake Forest team. Steve,
let's go, baby. Let's go. So wait, what? So I got Wake
You
Forest.
got
Right?
half
What
point.
position?
You
does
got
he
Wake
play?
Forest. He's a quarterback. Quarterback.
Okay.
Quarterback. All right, here we go.
I almost want to give him the win just for sticking that. That's.
I mean,
I'm
I don't
not
know
going to
how-
argue it, Alan. I'm not going to argue it.
All right, we need to see your hands, Matthew.
Here,
I
they're
need to
here.
see your hands.
They're here.
Okay, here we go. All right, Alan, your player is Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson. You know what? Let me give you a hint. Here we go. Let's hit the hit button. The hit button. This player's coach will be Ryan Day. There's your hint.
Okay. That's a good hint. Because there's 2 Bo Jacksons in this class.
That's true.
This one is a running back going to Ohio State.
Oh, man. He got it. Wait, let's hit the button. There we go. All right, Matthew.
Do I get a hint
Are you
too?
ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
You're ready.
Okay.
Matthew,
All right. Yeah.
your player is Noah Piper.
Noah Piper. I'd like my hint, please, sir. Please. If you
All
don't
right,
mind.
here's your hint. This player will attend a school in the continental United States.
Okay, thank you for that helpful hint. Okay, Noah Piper. Also, you wouldn't happen to have him graded, would you? That would have helped me, Okay, I would at least guess an offensive position last time. All right, so Noah Piper. We're gonna go with tight end. Okay, I already know that's wrong because of Felix's face. So I'm gonna change it to wide receiver, just because. Wide receiver going to South Alabama.
Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. Noah Piper, kicker, Yale.
Okay. That was
Matthew,
my next guess.
it's still close. You can still got it. All right. Here we go.
An all-American
this is-
kicker, too, by the way.
There we go.
I don't grade kickers. I don't grade kickers.
All-American Bowl this
So
week.
I don't grade kickers, unfortunately.
CFF Jared, that's somebody we're probably going to play in redraft college fantasy. All right, Alan, remember this is going to be an easy one. Maybe. Taven St. Clair. Would you like a hint?
I'll take
You know
the
what?
hint.
Let's give Alan a hint. This player will be going to a school they play in a venue called the Horseshoe.
Oh, that's okay. So he's going to Ohio State, and I'll guess because Steele Zella was a quarterback. I'm gonna guess quarterback here too.
He's the man. Alan Trieu gets it right again. Tavian St. Clair, quarterback, Ohio State. Matthew, your player. Let me see your hands.
I've had my hands up the whole time.
Samuel Garcia.
Okay, I'd like my hint, please, sir.
Okay, would you like a hint? Here we go. This player attends a school in a state that was a Spanish colony between 1541 and when the Spanish abandoned it in 1680. In 1846, this state became a U.S. territory as a part of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, a treaty which also ended the Mexican-American War.
Okay, thank you for that very
That's
helpful
way
and
more
history.
detail than I got in my hint, by the way.
That's very true. And I really wish I knew my history at this moment. That would probably be more helpful. All right, we're gonna go with I'm sticking with wide receiver, just because I'm gonna stick with wide receiver, and we're going to go with UTSA.
I mean, it's not a bad guess, but I'm sorry, it's wrong. The answer was Samuel Garcia, guard, New Mexico State.
Close.
New Mexico. You don't know your New Mexico history?
I don't, unfortunately.
I should have said something about Jared Kill. You would have got it.
I would have gotten it then. Yeah.
All right, here's our last one. This is the money ball here, okay? This is the money ball. Alan, your player is Deuce Knight.
Okay.
Alan, would you like a hint? You know what? Let's give him a
Yeah.
hint. Let's give him a hint. Alan, this player is a quarterback at Auburn.
Heck of a hint. So I'm gonna say quarterback at Auburn. It's almost too obvious, but so it made me nervous. But yeah, that's gonna be my guess.
That's why he's the man. Matthew?
Yep.
We're not looking good here. Okay.
It's all right. It's all right. It's all right.
Matt-
Time for comeback. Time for comeback. What you got it.
This is the last one. This is the money ball.
Let's do it.
Cameron Pig. Cameron Pig.
Do I get a elaborate hint like Alan did on that one?
Sure.
What
Would you like a hint? Here we go.
Give it to me.
Your hint is this player attends a school that starts with an S.
Cool. Okay.
Cannon. I'm sorry. Cannon. Cannon Pig. Not Cameron. Cannon.
It starts with an S. Okay. Well, we're gonna go with I'm gonna go with Stanford as a school because I feel like that's the kind of school you would go for. You would not give me a nope. Okay. Well, since that's wrong already.
No, there's no reactions. There's no reactions.
I mean, Alan clearly told me I was wrong just to go with his face, not just yours. So we'll go with I'm gonna go with linebacker Syracuse.
So you almost had it. Just the spelling, Matthew. I'm sorry. That is the wrong answer. Cannon Pig is a tight end at Samford. Samford. Matthew, thank you for playing. We really appreciate it. Let's give it up for our returning champion, Alan Trieu. Alan, there you go, man. There you go.
I would trade all of those wins to have guessed Wake Forest out of the blue.
Did you look that up?
Blind squirrel. No, blind squirrel. Every once in a while.
I was like, somebody's feeding you information over here.
No,
Somebody's
you know what?
feeding you information.
Since what's you guys are both lawyers. What's it called when you do something, a crime, and then after a certain amount of time passes?
The statute of limitations.
Statute of limitations. Since the statute of limitations are out yet, Austin did feed me the answer last year because I begged him to before the show.
I don't think I had it.
One
Okay.
of them.
I didn't have. This was only on paper today, so nobody had the answers on this one.
No.
Okay.
It wasn't. When you gave it to me, I believe he looked it up really quick and sent it to me, and I stalled last year. So I'll own up to that last year.
Some
Just
shenanigans going on. Okay. I think most crimes have a 7-year statute of limitations, so we're still within it. All right, Austin, we're going to do a mock draft. Alan's sticking around for the show. We're actually going to do a mock draft, and I think we have the visual to actually put up on the screen.
Is
that
do.
Right?
Hold on 1 second here.
Matty Ice says Matt, it was rigged for Matt to win.
Yeah. Rigged for me to win. I still couldn't do it.
OG going to Nest. Yeah. That was a guess. Matthew got one right with Wake Forest. Very, very, very surprising. So, okay. All right. So we're giving Alan the first pick, and I'm next. Okay. All right. Alan, you've got the first pick here. You're on.
Boy, I feel like this is like the hint you gave me for Deuce Knight. It's too easy. So I got to take Bryce Underwood.
Matt and Austin, is there any argument for any other player other than Bryce Underwood? Like, is this? I'm thinking last year, somebody may have taken DJ Lagway. Somebody may have taken, I always say Dominic Royola, Dylan Royola. But is there any argument for any other player? Well, like, make a case for somebody else going number one, Matthew.
I mean, I think the only other player you could argue, it's just who I'd assume you're going to take here, is Keelan Russell going to Alabama. Just because he's going to be paired with Kalen DeBoer, I think you can make the argument that they're not that far off from a prospect comparison, at least what we think they can do from a fantasy side of things. And again, being paired with Kalen DeBoer, what we've seen him do with quarterbacks, especially quarterbacks who can run, you would hope and assume that the fantasy upside there is possibly better than Bryce Underwood's. Because again, everything you guys talked about at the beginning of the show with the concerns about Michigan's offense.
And I feel like I did this. I'm not going to take Keelan Russell. I feel like I did this in another mock draft. I'm going to take Decorian Moore. I think he's going to go in there and start opposite Evan Stewart and be the number 2 for Dante Moore. And I like what Dan Lanning is doing. I've said this before. There's a part of me that maybe it's just me. I feel like elite wide receiver, like, the Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, like that type of player. We got Lenore Sellers right last year. Right now, he's on a trajectory to be a first-round pick, right? it's harder for me to get those wide receivers. So that's why right here, like I'm going to go wide receiver.
It's just a you problem, by the way.
It probably is
just a you problem.
Yeah, it probably is a me problem because I suck at the wide receiver position. So I'm taking DeCorian Moore at number 2.
Did you not end up with a lot of TJ Moore last year?
I have a lot of TJ Moore. I do.
There we go.
I do. But still, I mean, and it's funny because I traded you, Austin. I traded you a pick in a league, and you ended up taking DJ Lagway, I think.
Yeah, I traded up and took DJ Lagway.
2.
Yeah.
Like I gave you, yeah. Okay. All right.
Yep.
I mean, you just made my pick easier. I'm going to take Keelan Russell. I think, he has a chance to be the number 1 quarterback in the class when it's all said and done, especially being paired with Kalen DeBoer there. Going to have Ryan Williams for at least 1 year. I still think there's a realistic shot Russell could start this year as a true freshman. I mean, I think he's played well enough in high school, could go in there. I don't think Ty Simpson, Austin Mack are really that good. I don't know. I mean, we were going to do a portal show. I actually thought if like maybe a Devin Brown ended up at Alabama, maybe he would sit, but I think there's a shot we see Russell play year 1. So.
All right. That's Keelan Russell at the 103. Austin, you're up at the 104.
Yeah, I think kind of the obvious final guy in this tier then is Deuce Knight, the quarterback going to Auburn. Talk about elite. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Elite physical upside. Paired with an offense that I think we at least coaching staff that we think is mildly competent when it comes to getting quarterback production. He's fairly raw, but I mean, I think they've got enough pass catchers there. They're not going to force him to start day 1, which I think would be a little bit of a disaster. So I think you have to take him early here.
Can I say something? Like the last time there was a draft where I had the 101 and the 103. I went Dante Moore, Zachariah Branch went 102, and then I took Malachi Nelson. At the time, I thought I was going to be set forever. I think that's the other reason why I'm a little bit afraid to go.
I mean, not to dive that far into the strategy of it, but I think the supplemental draft, because of the nature of the limited player pool, like that's when you take the shots at the elite quarterbacks. Like in a startup where there's like you've got 150 quarterbacks to choose from, you can be a little more choosy. I think in these, if there's a guy sitting there, I think you take him. But that's just from a strategic standpoint. I think where I come from on these, because I don't draft them early in startups, but in these I'll be really aggressive.
All right, Alan, you got the 105.
Okay, I'm gonna take Harlem Berry. In our industry, he's pretty much the consensus number 1 back, and super physically talented guy. I don't know that he'll be the immediate starter, but I think he's going to get a lot of carries and will eventually be a high production guy.
Fastest man at both the Rivals camp and what was the other? It was 2 camps back to back where he was the fastest.
I think
man.
Under Armour, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Probably reminds me a little bit of Javid Best / Chase Edmonds, Harlem Berry. I'm going to go with Austin. I asked you earlier about players we were different on. Usman Chroma is our number 1. Isn't Usman Chroma our number 1 back?
Yes, I believe he is.
Usman Chroma is our number 1 back going there to Florida State. We know Mark Norvell down there is in a kind of win at all costs situation, and he's had a lot of history with the running back position from Darrell Henderson, who's the guy, Kenneth Gainwell. And so I think that this guy is going to be Usman Chroma, who's a different style of player than both of those guys. But I like him in this mold. So I'm going to take Usman Chroma here at Florida State, who flipped from Georgia to Florida State on signing day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll take Taven St. Clair here. He's the last tier 1 graded player that I have in this class. I mean, obviously, Alan talked about at the beginning of the show, quarterback is the strength of this class, and I want to try and get one of those guys I think can still be elite here toward the end. I think there's a little bit of a drop-off after St. Clair. So.
All right. I guess I'll take my top running back, actually, which is Bo Jackson. And I know there's, maybe some slight injury concerns, and it's looking like a bit of a crowded backfield with James Peoples there. They bring in CJ Donaldson. But I think that he's kind of got that like slashing running style, like kind of almost like a Trevor Etienne, like stylistically kind of back. Travis. Which one was with Clemson? You can't have
Trevor.
2 kids and name them the same exact damn name. Okay.
Travis Etienne.
Was Travis the one at Clemson? Whichever the one that played at Clemson and now in the NFL with the Jaguars. I think he runs a little bit like him stylistically. But we'll see if he can get some carries here this year.
All right, Alan, you are back up at the 109.
So I probably should have asked this at the start. Is this draft for freshman year production, or is this like you're thinking we're keeping these guys for 4 years?
So in Austin and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So generally speaking, in freshman drafts, I think the heaviest weighted factor is their projection to the NFL.
Okay.
With that's probably 90% of it, with like 10% being, how productive are they going to be early? Because in the Campus to Canton League, we're trying to build that pipeline to the NFL, and this is the best way to do it, is drafting those players who have high-end ceilings who end up being drafted.
Got it. Okay. So in that case, with me going quarterback and then running back, I'm going to go receiver here. Khalil Lockett is the next one on my board, and you talk about upside. I mean, this guy, and he's tearing it up right now at the All-American Bowl. So I happened to see some clips of him today, looking every bit like a 5-star. So that's Khalil Lockett's my guy.
Oh, man. And I feel like I'm just going to make Felix picks because I like big players, and I took Usman Chroma. I'm going to take Michael Terry, and I just feel like he has a lot of outs, to use a poker terminology. Like an elite athlete, can play running back, could probably play tight end or wide receiver also. I think that they'll just find a position for him there at Texas. And so I'm going to take Michael Terry here at the 110.
Well, I'll just keep the Texas train rolling here. I actually think Jamie French is better than Khalil Lockett, Alan. So I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on him. But I think, he's a player that we talked a lot about him going to that room. Obviously, all three of these players have a chance to be very productive in that Sark offense, especially if guys like Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond both head to the NFL draft this year. But I think all three could be very, very good for Texas for that offense. But I just think French is the best of the three.
Yeah, I think he might be. I think he's better right now. I think that's why I asked the question about long-term upside, because I think Lockett's got some tools. He's just a little bit more raw. But I think in terms of NFL upside in a few years, if everything turns out, I think Khalil could end up being the higher drafted guy. But I think in terms of who might play earlier, I think French is the more polished guy at the moment.
Gotcha.
All right. Matt, I have a confession to make. I dropped French way down into tier 3 this week. He's not been good this week at the practices, from what I hear, and kind of reminded me of Mylan Graham from last year in terms of just put him in that situation. He can't cut it. That's all right.
I love your pick right there because I'm very high on that player.
Hussein Longstreet, quarterback going to USC. I hesitate to do he's connected to Lincoln Riley thing, so I'm not sure how long Lincoln Riley is going to be there. But I think that he's, in terms of tools, certainly up there. I think a lot of classes he might be the number one toolsy guy in the class. A bit of an unfortunate year where he's probably behind guys like Deuce Knight and Underwood who are and even maybe Russell, who are equally toolsy. But go there, sit for a year, kind of learn, figure things out. Fantasy upside with his legs. Kind of got better as his high school career went on. I think that we have not seen the best of Hussein Longstreet yet.
All right, Alan, you are back up at let's just recap the first round here. Austin, can you scroll it down real quick? The first round, Bryce Underwood, DeCorian Moore, Keelan Russell, Deuce Knight, Harlem Berry, Usman Chroma, Tavian St. Clair, Bo Jackson, Khalil Lockett, Michael Terry, Jamie French, and then the last pick was Hussein Longstreet. Matt, is there any pick that you didn't particularly like in this round?
I mean, probably. I mean, not to call you, probably Michael Terry, just because I think you can get him in the second round. I think, again, even though I do think, again, great athlete, very intriguing player, don't know if he's going to play running back, wide receiver. And again, Sark seems to be able to get those guys the ball and find ways. Ryan Wingo was a very raw wide receiver coming in last year. We saw what he was able to do. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe that won't be, but I just there's a couple other players I would have taken over him, including some of the quarterbacks like Hussein Longstreet. I would have taken Khalil Lockett and Jamie French both ahead of Michael Terry. That's probably the only one. I wouldn't have taken the running backs as early as they went either, but I don't think we'll see Michael Terry go in any first rounds, personally.
Austin, any problems other than Terry with this first round?
No, not really. I mean, you're arguing semantics at this point because I think the top 4 at this point are Underwood, Russell, Knight at quarterback, and then DeCorian Moore. I would probably take Keelan Russell at minimum above DeCorian Moore, personally. I mean, I get what you're saying. Well, and I guess strategically speaking, like if you have the second pick, if you think you can get like Matt Zollers or somebody like that early second round, then maybe you've locked, because it's a bad wide receiver class in my opinion. Like maybe a couple of guys will come out of the woodwork, but compared to the past couple of years, I think this wide receiver class is really, really rough. It's odd. I don't know how that has happened this year, but.
All right, Alan, we'll let you go here at the second round, the 201.
Okay. I'm going to go. This is tough to think about it from. I'm going to go Jerome Miles. I think I like him maybe a little bit more than some of our staff does. And, I watched him tear up IMG, had that game on. And I think I really, really like the kid's skill set. He's physical. He blocks. I think that's going to help him in terms of getting drafted higher one day. And I think, being as big and physically strong as he is, I think I could see him finding his way onto the field pretty early.
Yeah, Texas A&M coming out of Corner Canyon there, playing with Isaac Wilson at Corner Canyon. Everybody thought that he was going to go to Utah, and of course, suffering that knee injury his senior year. So let's see if he gets back to health. And the good news is Texas A&M just signed a whole bunch of wide receivers, so they're not going to need him early on. Probably a year 1-0 candidate to just watch out for, though, Jerome Miles. But 6'2", 210. I mean, I love that. Matt, who would you take here, Matt Zollers or your boy Alex Mansky?
Alex Mansky for sure.
No, you wouldn't. Why are you always doing that? Why are you always writing the wrong answers on the mirror for me?
Because I want to take Matt Zollers so I can talk about Matt Zollers. I'm the highest on our team on him. Here, I think he's an incredible quarterback.
I'll take him right now, and you talk about him. I'm taking Matt Zollers here.
I mean, look, going to Missouri, I think he's an extremely fun prospect to watch. He's a gamer, can do it all, really explosive arm, not a bad athlete as well. And again, we talked a lot about this with Dylan Raiola last year. With the quarterbacks in these drafts, like you kind of want to see them play early to kind of see what they have. You don't want them to sit because then sometimes they keep their value, but I do think they can lose. I get Missouri brought in Bo Perbula. I'm sorry. I think Matt Zollers is a much better passer than Bo Perbula right now, and probably a better quarterback overall. I think there's a realistic shot we see him play this year. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks in class, and what Austin mentioned earlier is like that would be my goal if I take like a DeCorian Moore, one of the running backs early, is the hope that I can get Matt Zollers in the second round because I think he's a guy who could easily end up being like a first-round quarterback in the NFL.
There we go. All right, Matt, you just talked about my pick, so you can go ahead and make yours.
Yeah, I mean, both of the picks that I wanted just got sniped because I was hoping to get either Jerome Miles or Matt Zollers. So I'll take a running back that I really like, very explosive. I don't know the exact stats off the top of my head, but literally just set all kinds of records in Alabama this year. Was at like 50-plus rushing touchdowns, broke Derrick Henry's rushing record, and Alvin Henderson. And again, same thing. Like I think he goes to Auburn this year and could easily be the starter. He can catch passes as well. And then when you talk about just the future of him and Deuce Knight possibly being in that backfield and both how athletic both those guys are, could be a lot of fun to watch. So I'll take Alvin Henderson.
Alvin Henderson goes off the board at the 203. Austin, you're up.
I've got some of the All-Star games on the brain this week. I've been following along pretty closely. I still have the Under Armour game or the Under Armour game recorded. I've watched about half of it, so I had to finish watching that one. But Taylor Taylor apparently has been really good at practice this week at the Navy All-American game. He's a guy, I have him as my wide receiver 5 right now, but I've got a huge group of guys along with him. So taking him here over maybe one or two other guys that I technically have ranked higher, feels okay. He's going to Georgia. Georgia's real hit or miss on, I think, both their wide receiver talent evaluation and development. I think they have probably as many whiffs as any big school in the country. Maybe Oregon's up there with them, but they have found some gems the past couple of years. And obviously it's not like Taylor's some 3-star guy. He's rated pretty highly, but I think he, just going in there, I mean, look at the rest of the wide receivers on that team. We just watched this team like dude just getting the ball, hitting them in the chest and like bouncing all over the place. Like the wide receiver room there is not good. I think Taylor gets run as a freshman and can develop into like a second round guy. I don't know that he's got like a first round ceiling from a skill set perspective, but he could prove me wrong.
All right. Alan, you are up at the 204, 205.
All right,
Austin, did you put your pick in, Austin?
I'm doing it right now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna maybe go. I would be curious what your guys' evaluation of this guy is, because I haven't heard him come up in your quarterback discussions, but I like Jaron Kiave Sagapolatele, who's headed to Cal, flipped from Oregon. I really liked the fit when he was going to Oregon, but at Cal, I think that's another. You talk about Michigan investing in Bryce Underwood's success. I think at Cal they're going to be very invested in this kid, and so I think he's going to get a lot of chances. Maybe have a chance early, but super, I think, high end arm talent.
And Matt, you did a video yesterday on him flipping?
Yeah, a couple of days ago. Yeah, I think he's I think I have him as my QB 6 in the class. I really like him. A left-handed guy, very strong arm. I think he's very polished already as a quarterback prospect. My biggest thing that I love about him, I always call it like the pocket manipulation. It's just like his ability to avoid defenders and get the ball out is really good. And again, as Alan just mentioned, the flip to Cal, they have nobody on their roster, so he literally probably starts day one for them. And I think is a good enough player to help Cal win games and kind of just continue to progress.
Alan, do you think he thought that he was going to be in the mix to start as a freshman? Those quotes that came out after he flipped were very weird to me.
It did kind of sound that way. Brandon Huffman was all over that for us. And I thought it was a little bit of a strange flip to begin with. And so it didn't, like, when he flipped back, I was like, yeah, that makes sense based on, him wanting the early chance to start. So I don't have the full details of that, but I think in terms of looking at him in this type of setting, in this draft, I mean, I like the fit for him at Cal better just because he has such a runway to play and be able to, like, again, be, have resources put around him and be the guy there, where not that Oregon does extremely well with their quarterback development, but there's more guys in the room there.
I was actually talking about a little bit about this week, Alan. I just wanted to have one more question here for you. In your experience, like, if you ask some of these kids to name the other guys on the depth chart at the position at the school they're going to, how many, like, do you think that he would know who Austin Novosad is if you asked him who is Austin Novosad? Like, any of these kids, it seems like there is sometimes just like an unawareness of what is actually in front of them when they're going to get there.
Austin thinks that there needs to be some sort of third party that says, hey, let's consult with you. Let's talk about the depth chart here and what your chances are of playing.
The coaching staff's history of development, like does this offensive system even use a tight end? We see these guys go to schools all the time. Like, the offense just asks the tight end to stand there. I mean, it blows my mind.
I think it greatly depends on the kid and then the family and who else they have around them, their high school coach, their trainer. Do they have somebody, like you said, who's asking these questions? They also, I mean, all of these guys, for the most part, visit these schools that they go to. And when they go, they sit in the meeting room. They see the depth, it's on the wall, or sometimes they're sitting in the meeting room with these very guys. He might be in a meeting room with Austin Novosad, or he may go to a practice and watch all of the quarterbacks on the roster throw. So when those guys make those decisions, it's even more head scratching, because I think most of the time they have this information put in front of them. It's not hard to find on the internet, for one thing, but then the biggest thing is that they go to these places, they visit, they sit in the meeting rooms, they watch practice, they go to games, they're given a roster at the games. So for the most part, I think they should have this information.
There we go. So Austin, I mean, that might be a good idea to start that campus to Canton consultant.
We're looking for investors, Alan. We'll talk after the show. We'll see.
I can get you the right people.
Perfect.
Now, Alan, I'm thinking about taking Lincoln Cure here, tight end going to Kansas State. But I think that tight end can be a difficult position to scout because, whether it be Deuce Robinson or Eric Gilbert, like usually these guys are bigger, faster, stronger. They have the requisite physicality. I mean, I was a big fan of Eli Raridan coming out of school at Notre Dame, and Lincoln Cure, he has all of that. It kind of reminds me of Detroit area tight end Theo Johnson coming out of the Detroit area, Austin. But you were high on the tight end class. Are you high on Cure?
I am high on Cure. I do agree with you that it's becoming a hard position to scout. And when I look even at my own region, I mean, I can tell you without naming names, a lot of schools passed on TJ Hawkinson. A lot of schools passed on Sam Laporta. Like those are the guys. There's a lot of that's just it's even more. It's like of a tricky kind of late blooming position. There's guys that walk off the basketball court that haven't played football that end up being good. It is a tricky position to scout. I do really like Lincoln Cure, and I think that I think him sticking with Kansas State, he's going to get a lot of balls there. I could make the argument that from a fantasy perspective, a guy like Andrew Olish might be of equal value because he's, going to a place that uses the tight end a ton. I think he's a really good athlete, a really good pass catcher. So I don't know that there's enough difference between those two. Like I thought about Cure in the last round, and I was like, there may not be a big enough gap between him and a guy like Olish or some of those other guys behind him to where I would, jump on a guy like Cure at this point.
Settle this debate. Theo Johnson from the Detroit area. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he's right over the river, right? He's right over the water.
There we go. The debate is settled. Theo Johnson.
I can see where somebody would take umbrage with that, though.
There we go. Well,
Donald Trump is looking to rectify this situation.
Detroit,
that's right.
When you said Detroit area, I was like, wait a second. And I was like,
all right. Matthew, you got the 207 here.
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, I agree with something Austin said earlier. This is kind of a weak wide receiver class. So I'm kind of looking for guys I think will avoid the year 1-0. And I think that this player has a chance to do that, even though this team did bring in a couple players in the transfer portal, including one Deshaun Stribling, who I think is a very good wide receiver and fits that offense very well. But I'm going to take Ole Miss's Caleb Cunningham. I think he's a very good wide receiver. We have him as a very good athlete. Like I believe he's like .886, 21 miles per hour. He can go up and can get the ball in contested catch situations. He's a basketball star, track star as well. Like I think he's a very good route runner. Doesn't have like quite that explosive speed, but again, like I think his ability to thrive in contested catch situations is incredible. I like him going here to Ole Miss Caleb Cunningham, Austin.
All right, Austin, that brings you up on with the 208.
Yeah, I was tuning you out. Sorry about that.
I'm used to it from everybody on the show at this point, so.
I've got a big group of receivers here that I think are kind of equivalent to each other. So I'm going to go Kamario Taylor. I'm just going to dip into the toolsy quarterback well again. Going to Mississippi State. Again, not a guy that I would want to trot out there year one, but I do think that if things come together for him and he can develop, we're talking about a kid who could see a Lenora Sellers type rise in a year or two from a value perspective. But I don't like him as much as I liked Sellers. And I do think that there's a chance that it's like more Donovan Smith than Lenora Sellers. Like that spectrum is so tough to kind of nail down because it's sometimes tough to know what these guys have between the ears. But I think the tools are there for sure for Taylor to be pretty good.
Mario Taylor, the Mississippi State off the board at the 208. Alan, you are up with what will be your last pick? Yeah. So, Alan, you got your last pick here at the 209.
So we just talked about, I'll take Olish at this spot. And obviously going to a place that's done really well with their tight ends. He's not, you guys probably know he's not the same as Tyler Warren or Pat Freiermuth. He's actually pretty different from those guys. I think he's more of a receiver hybrid than either of them. I don't know that he'll ever be like a fully on the ball, complete tight end, but I think he's going to be a pass catcher. I'd be interested to see how much weight they can put on him and what they do with him from a blocking perspective. But as far as catching the ball and some of the things he can do with the ball in the air and after the catch, like I feel really good about that. And I know that he's going to a place that's going to use the position. So that's my last guy.
2 tight ends off the board. Austin, I'm trying to remember, was it Gideon Davidson or Harry Dalton that you said this is a Felix running back? And we watched during our signing day tape, he just ran straight through. It's Harry. Yeah. We watched the first highlight on this guy's tape, just running his helmet straight through a safety. Safety didn't even get up off the ground. Give me the physical player. Give me Harry Dalton here.
All right. So for mine, I'm just going to name a player that I really like. He's definitely not going to go in the second round, but just, I know a lot of people are going to listen to the show because Allen's on. So I just want to wax poetic about him real quick. And that's going to now Minnesota quarterback Jackson Collick. I mean, an incredible athlete, 3-sport athlete. We have him at a 91.917 rating there. One of the strongest arms in this class as well, up to like a 58 ball velo. And he can run the ball. I think he's averaged like over 300 yards rushing in his career. He transferred up in his junior year and actually had like close to a 65% completion percentage. We saw that drop in his senior year, which worries me a little bit, but he's a gamer. He can play outside the pocket, throw from multiple arm angles. I love this kid. I think there's a realistic shot he starts over Drake Lindsey as a true freshman. And I think, is going to end up being a name that we talk about. I don't know that he's a day one guy, but I think he's a guy we talk about from a CFF perspective. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch over the next couple of years.
Matthew, we always have a player that, the community or the company kind of gravitates towards, and they end up getting pushed way up the board and their value kind of skyrockets. Do you think that Collick is going to be that guy for us this year?
No, because Austin and them don't like him. I'm the only one who likes him. Yeah, Austin hates him. I really like him.
Don't hate him.
I think
all right, so not Collick.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
All right. Well, we'll figure out who that player is going to be at. It's in February probably. All right, Austin. You're closing out the draft here for us at the 212.
Okay. I'll go Shakai Mills-Knight, running back who's going to Ole Miss. We're a tiny bit higher than the services are on him, but he's got really good size already. Like, he's listed at 215. I don't know that he's quite 215, but he's definitely over 200 pounds. So, from a size perspective, he's there already. 80th percentile speed score. I think he's got some of the better feel for the running back position in the class. He's not a guy that a lot of these guys nowadays, you got to get them into space. They can't do it themselves. But he's a guy that can run between the tackles and be very successful there, can lower his shoulder and pick up difficult yardage. I think the burst is better than average. We don't have a score for him, but I think it's pretty good just from watching him. Really, he's got a little bit of a thinner lower half, so we'll see if he can bulk that up a little bit. A little bit of an injury history as well, but it seems like he's bounced back from that and hasn't really seen any bad side effects. So I think he's a guy that can go there at Ole Miss and play, or at least be on the depth chart and get close to the field pretty early in his career. So Shakai Mills-Knight will be my final pick here.
Not to put you on the spot, Matt and Austin, but people who are tuning in for the first time, the freshman and supplemental draft means that you can take any freshman like we're drafting here today, or any players who are left in the player pool from the season prior. For example, Lad McConkey, I'm trying to think of Carson Beck, Aronde Gadsden Jr., some players who were Elke Mayor, because he broke out late. People did not have him rostered. There were players like that in the player pool who you could have drafted at any point in the freshman and supplemental draft. Matt, Austin, are there any of those players, non-freshmen that you could think of that people should be considering, in the first 2 rounds? I know, obviously, I've mentioned the name Jake Retzlaff at BYU. I think you should be considering him. Maybe not in the first round, but is somewhere in the second round. I think I'd be fine. But Matt, any of those players that you could think of? I'm looking right now, and I can't really think of anybody, but I could just be it could be just because I'm doing it here, off the top of my head.
Man, I'm trying to think of someone. Like Kanye Udo going to obviously Arizona State, the running back, transfer up. I think he's a player that I would target. I know, again, I did a video on him recently, and Felix, you and I have talked about. I know there are people in the chat who disagree, or at the company who disagree. I do think he's got a chance to be really good. Outside of him, I'm trying to think of someone from the G5 that stands out to me, and I can't think of anyone. Austin, do you?
Austin, what about Razul Faison, who just transferred to Where did he just transfer to?
South Carolina.
South Carolina. So he's going to take over for Rocket Sanders there.
Yeah, I don't necessarily hate that. The guys that immediately came to mind for me, assuming that they're still sitting out there, because I think they are in some spots, Malcolm Simmons, the second-year wide receiver at Auburn, I think factors in there this year. And I expect that offense to be much better this year with improved quarterback play. This one, they're not actually brothers, but the Miller Bros at Colorado. I see them floating around out there. Draylon and Omarion Miller, I think, are both really talented wide receivers. It depends on how much you trust Canton Salter. I'm not sure I do. I'm not sure what that offense is going to look like this year. I think that could be a round peg square hole situation, but I think both are really, really, really talented. And I've seen both of them floating around out there a little bit in leagues. So, yeah.
And we'll keep doing exercises like this, and we'll help people, identify who those players should be. So here's how the second round shook out. Jerome Miles, wide receiver, Texas A&M. Matt Zollers, quarterback. Where's Matt? Missouri. Alvin Henderson, running back, Auburn. Talon Taylor, wide receiver, Georgia. Alan, say his name again. I've been trying. Jaron Kway Sagapua.
It's Kiave, I believe. Kiave.
Yeah.
Jaron Kiave.
Yeah.
Sagapua. Am I saying the last name right?
Yes.
Sagapua. Quarterback now at Cal. Lincoln Cure, tight end, Kansas State. Caleb Cunningham, wide receiver, Ole Miss. Kamario Taylor, quarterback, Mississippi. Andrew Olish, tight end, Penn State. Harry Dalton, running back. Now, no Quentin Joyner. No Quentin Joyner there at USC. Harry Dalton, running back, USC. Jackson Collick, quarterback, Minnesota. And Shaquille Mills-Knight, running back, Ole Miss. Matt, any thoughts about this second round here?
No, I mean, I think that most of those guys in there, outside of, again, Jackson Collick, are probably going in there. I mean, I like the pick of Lincoln Cure. I was thinking about taking him there. I like the pick of Alameda of Jaron as well. We talked about him when he made that pick. I think he's going to be a really good quarterback. And I get the pick of Kamario Taylor as well, just from his upside from a tools perspective.
Austin, any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I do think we've lamented, this isn't that strong of a class, and I agree from a grading perspective, but there are still some moderately fun players on the board who I think are a little more coin flippy. But guys like Lotsier Brooks, the wide receiver going to Alabama, who's really dynamic, and they don't have a lot there, kind of targeting depth chart. I keep hearing good things about Quincy Porter. Was not a guy that I'm a huge fan of, but he's almost a guy like I'm just going to rank based on what everybody else is saying about him, and if it's wrong, so be it. He's been apparently pretty good this week at All-Star game practice as well. So I mean, there are definitely still, and Gideon Davidson is another guy. Like, he's got all these crazy athletic numbers. I do not see it on the field at all, but the Clemson apparently likes him. It's a thin depth chart. So targeting some of these guys, maybe going to thinner depth charts with good athletic talent. I think that might be the sweet spot this year in drafts.
If you made it to this point in the video, go ahead and drop a like. Let's get this video to 50 likes. How about that? 50 likes. And thank you, Alan. Thank you for coming on again. You were great. This is the longest that you've ever spent with us. We really appreciate it. But that's going to be our show for tonight. Apologies to Kirk Herbstreit. We ran out of time. We got too busy with Alan doing the game show and everything like that. All right. That's it for Austin Nace, for Matt Bruening, for Alan Trieu. Good night and good luck.